Right now, joining me in the studio is Labor's transport spokesman, Anthony Albanese. Welcome to Lateline.
Good to be with you.
Firstly, Arthur Sinodinos. Labor wants to have him hauled before a parliamentary inquiry. George Brandis, you would have just heard there, said this is unprecedented, not happy.
Well, George Brandis showed his ignorance of his own Senate standing orders. Standing Order 177 specifically provides for senators to be directed to appear before Senate committees. Now, normally that wouldn't be necessary because senators volunteer to come forward, but it would appear that Senator Sinodinos and indeed people in the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party, including people such as Senator, the good Senator who was of course the Treasurer of the Liberal Party at the time where the New South Wales Electoral Commission have found that there are questions to be answered about the channeling, if you like, of donations through organisations like the Free Enterprise Foundation, and a lack of disclosure that essentially people were making donations through the Free Enterprise Foundation in order to not go through proper disclosure, and in some cases it would appear people making donations who weren't eligible because it was against the provisions that were provided for in the New South Wales election.
Now, the New South Wales Electoral Commission issued that report that implicated Senator Sinodinos in knowing about this arrangement with the Free Enterprise Foundation, and then they withheld those millions of dollars in funding. But he says they've got it wrong, but what you want to further investigate.
Well, he wrote indeed to the Electoral Commission and asked them to withdraw the suggestion, and they rejected that. So they obviously have a very strong view about this. Now, there are real implications here. Senator Sinodinos is the Cabinet Secretary. So he's responsible for decisions right across portfolios as the Cabinet Secretary, including issues relating to the electoral laws. And in the lead up to an election, it is appropriate that the Senate examine these issues and that there be transparency. The New South Wales Electoral Commission and those processes will take their place. But because of Senator Sinodinos' position as Cabinet Secretary, there is an interest in getting to the bottom of this and doing it prior to the election being called.
Will you get to the bottom of it, though, by the time that Parliament is wrapped up, dissolved, and we're heading off to the election campaign? Or is this just a way for you guys to score a few points?
Well, this could be resolved, of course, pretty easily if they just fessed up. We have a system of transparency that's required by the public. The public want to know who's donating to political parties. They want it to be declared. They want it to be out there in the open. And if you have donations being channeled through organisations in order to avoid that disclosure, then that is of concern to the general public. And it's of concern if the Cabinet Secretary has knowledge of these issues. It's important that he take advantage of the opportunity that the Senate is providing him. And I would have thought that if there's nothing to see here, he'll quite happily appear and give his full exposition of his knowledge of all of these matters.
Okay, can I just move on to the election campaign that we're unofficially in at the moment? What's going to be the big theme here? Is it Labor versus the banks, the coalition versus the construction and transport unions?
Well, it's Labor with an agenda for the future. Labor with an agenda for jobs and the new economy, with an agenda for public transport, with an agenda for renewable energy, an agenda for fibre, not copper, in terms of broadband, an agenda which puts the education of every child and the opportunity being given to them to be the best that they can and to have that opportunity in life, versus a government that simply doesn't have a plan for the future, that doesn't have a sense of purpose, that is running from itself. I mean, people, I think, were pretty relieved when Malcolm Turnbull took over from Tony Abbott. They expected him to take issues like climate change and the Republic and marriage equality seriously, issues that he stood for. But it's clear that Malcolm Turnbull's fighting with Tony Abbott, but it's also clear that he's fighting with himself. And now this is a government that has been acting like an opposition for its entire 3 years. They don't have an agenda. And today we saw the Parliament
just on the
sit
agenda,
with
just
no
on, if I could just
legislation.
interrupt you, Mr Albanese, just on that agenda, tomorrow it seems like we're going to get a bit more of it. ASIC looks like its funding is going to be pumped up again. And this sort of almost deflates your Royal Commission, doesn't it? Because if they put money back into it, will it pressure you into having to make a similar commitment?
Not at all. Well, this is...
So you won't put more money into ASIC?
Well, we'll make our budget announcements at the appropriate time. But what we have here...
But if you wait until the Royal Commission's finished after 2 years, doesn't that put it 2 years down the road?
What we have here, we oppose the cuts to ASIC. We oppose them very clearly. What you have here is $120 million of cuts were made to ASIC.
Over 4 years?
The report is that $100 million is going to be put back, and they say, oh, this is a good initiative, you should say thank you. It's like this is the case across the board. The mean-spirited cuts from the 2014 budget are all still there.
But Labor also cut ASIC's budget by 38 million, didn't they, in 1 year?
When Scott Morrison hands down his budget, what people will be looking for is the cuts to pensions, the cuts to healthcare, the cuts to education, and to see whether they're still there. Because the government, when Scott Morrison talks about Labor needs to support these savings, that's what he's talking about. The 2014 budget, that is still at the heart of their agenda, and they haven't moved on from it.
But still, you're promising a $50 million inquiry. You could put that $50 million and it would more than reverse any yearly cut that's happened to ASIC over the past couple of years.
Well, look, this is a Royal Commission that is in the public interest. This isn't, unlike the government that makes decisions based upon politics and who was involved in terms of past Labor governments and has had those inquiries. We never did that between 2007 and 2013, and we won't do it next time. What we're saying here is that those families who've lost their life income due to bad advice from banks or financial institutions deserve answers. They deserve a proper inquiry. There hasn't been just one or two incidents here, and I'm certainly not anti-bank. So I used to work to declare an interest many years ago. I worked at the Commonwealth Bank. I'm certainly not anti-banks, but it is very clear that there are so many Australians, including ones in my electorate, who I've made representations for, who've been essentially done over and lost their savings and have been, they're broken people. I mean, this has had a real impact on people, and this is the sort of thing that is deserving of a Royal Commission. We don't take it lightly, but it is deserving of it because those people deserve that to happen.
Another major difference in this election campaign is going to be over the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, which is going to be abolished after going through Parliament. Are Labor going to re-establish it if they win government?
Well, what we will certainly do is provide for a mechanism in terms of road safety, and we'll talk with, as we did when we established the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, when I was the Transport Minister, we talked with the Australian Trucking Association, with the livestock transporters, with the Transport Workers Union, with owner drivers. There was a long process to make sure that we got it right. Now, in terms of the processes, what you've had is a single determination by the tribunal, one where the government didn't even bother to make a submission about what that determination should be, and when it's handed down, and we think it was a flawed determination, we said we'll prepare.
Okay, but just before we run out of time, can you be clear to people whether you'll restore it, re-establish it if you win?
Well, the real problem at the moment is that there is no road safety mechanism at all by just abolishing the tribunal. That's not good enough. We'll sit down with the stakeholders, but certainly it needs, in terms of road safety, should be above partisan politics. What we've seen this week isn't leadership, it's been cheap politics, and it's had, in my view, it's moral bankruptcy, because safety on our roads, where more than 300 Australians died last year as a result of accidents involving heavy vehicles, the government has now no mechanism at all.
Okay, one really brief question on I know a topic close to your heart, very fast rail. The Canberra Times joked today that it only ever runs at election time. What policy are you taking to the voters?
We're taking a policy of establishing a high-speed rail authority. We took it last time. I've introduced the bill 3 times. I had to reintroduce it this week because of the proroguing of Parliament. We think you need an authority to establish the corridor. We think this is a project makes sense. And what we do is give the authority the ability to call for expressions of interest, because it's very clear that there are global companies that have successfully promoted high-speed rail in Europe and in our region, and that we'd be asking them to put forward their proposition. We know there's $2.15 of benefit for every dollar of investment, for example, between Sydney and Melbourne. This is a project that stacks up, it's about the future, and it's about setting us up for this century.
All right, Anthony Albanese, thanks very much for joining Lateline.
Good to be with you.